The ship landed on Valora with a soft hum. Kong Do-yun stood near the window and looked at the alien world below. Purple mountains rose in the distance. Silver towers touched the sky. Everything looked beautiful and cold. He was 28 years old. He had black hair, tired eyes, and a face that showed nothing. He wore simple gray clothes. No medals, no uniform. Just a man who looked like he had given up on life long ago. The door opened. A Valoran guard stepped inside. He was tall, almost 8 feet, with silver skin and sharp violet eyes. He looked at Do-yun the way someone looks at an insect. "Human," the guard said. "Follow me." Do-yun followed without a word. The Valoran Empire was one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. They had ruled for 10,000 years. Their warriors were legendary. Their technology was beyond anything humans could build. And now, after a long and bloody war, they had one. The peace treaty was simple. Humans would give tribute. Humans would follow Valoran laws, and to seal the agreement, a human would marry into the Valoran royal family. Not a princess marrying a human prince. No. A human man would be given to a Valoran princess. Like a gift. Like property, the diplomats had chosen Do-yun because he had nothing. No family, no money, no political value. He was a former soldier who had been quietly removed from service. His records were sealed. Nobody knew why. Nobody cared. He was perfect. If he died, nobody would miss him. The palace was enormous. Do-yun walked through halls made of white stone and gold. Valoran nobles watched him pass. Some laughed. Others whispered. A few looked at him with open disgust. "So small," one noble said. "How do humans even survive?" Another asked. "They live for what, 80 years?" Like insects, Do-yun kept walking. His face showed nothing. They brought him to a large room where servants waited. They washed him, dressed him in Valoran ceremonial robes, and prepared him for the wedding. Nobody spoke to him directly. They treated him like furniture. 1 hour later, he stood in the Great Hall of Valora. The hall was massive. Thousands of Valorans filled the seats. The emperor sat on a throne of black crystal, watching with cold eyes. Generals, nobles, diplomats stood in perfect rows, and at the center of it all stood Princess War. She was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Tall and elegant, with silver skin that seemed to glow. Her hair was white like snow, falling past her shoulders. Her violet eyes were sharp and proud. She wore a dress of black and gold, and on her head sat a small crown. She did not look at Do-yun. Not once the priest began to speak in the Valoran language. Do-yun did not understand most of it. He stood still and waited. He knew why Princess Yura was here. She was the 3rd princess, which meant she had little chance of becoming empress. 2 years ago, she had made a political mistake. She had supported the wrong faction in a court dispute. Her punishment was this marriage. Being forced to marry a human was her shame. The ceremony continued. The priest asked questions. Yura answered in a flat voice. When it was Do-yun's turn, a translator whispered the words to him. He repeated them quietly. "I accept this bond." The crowd was silent. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. This was not a happy wedding. This was a transaction. When the ceremony ended, Yura turned and walked away without looking at her new husband. Her servants followed. Do-yun stood alone in the middle of the great hall. A Valoran general approached him. The general was huge, with scars on his face and medals on his chest. His name was Tarek, and he was famous for killing humans during the war. "So you are the human," Tarek said. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I expected something more. You look like a servant." Do-yun looked up at him. "I am what I am," Tarek laughed. "Wise words for an insect? Enjoy your time here, human. I doubt it will be long." He walked away, still laughing. That night, Do-yun was taken to his chambers. The room was small compared to the rest of the palace, but it was still larger than any place he had ever lived. A bed, a desk, A window looking out at the purple sky, he sat on the bed and closed his eyes. He thought about Earth, about the green forests and blue oceans, about the friends he had lost, about the battles he had fought, about the screams and the fire and the blood. He thought about why he was still alive when so many others were dead. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A servant entered, a young Valoran woman with nervous eyes. She carried fresh towels. "I brought these for you," she said quietly. "Thank you." She placed the towels on the desk. Then she paused. Her eyes moved to Doyen's back. His robe had shifted, revealing old scars. Many scars. They covered his skin like a map of pain. "Those marks," she whispered. "What weapon made them?" Doyen pulled his robe closed. "No weapon you would know, but they look so old." "How did you survive such wounds?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Old debts. That is all." The servant left quickly, her face pale. Doyen lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. He knew what the Valorans thought of him. They thought he was weak. They thought he was nothing. That was fine. He had been underestimated before, in another part of the palace. Princess Yuta sat in her private chambers. Her servants had removed her crown and her dress. She wore simple robes now, and her face showed her true feelings: anger, shame, frustration. "Human," she whispered to herself. "They married me to a human." Her advisor, a half-Valoran woman named Nari, stood nearby. Nari's mother had been human, which made her an outcast in Valoran society. But she was smart and loyal, so Yura kept her close. "The Emperor's decision is final," Nari said carefully. "I know." Yura's hands tightened into fists. "But a human Nari, they live for barely a century. They are weak. They have no power, no technology, no future. And now one of them is my husband." Nari was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I saw him during the ceremony. He did not react to the insults. He did not show fear or anger. He just stood there. Because he is empty. A shell of a man. Perhaps," Nari paused. "Or perhaps he is simply used to being underestimated." Yura looked at her advisor with cold eyes. "Do not tell me you feel sympathy for him." "No, Your Highness. I am simply saying that we know nothing about him. His records are sealed. Even our intelligence networks could not find much. That is strange for a man who is supposedly nobody." Ura turned away. "I do not care who he was. I only care that he stays out of my way." But late that night, as she tried to sleep, Yura could not stop thinking about the human's eyes. They had been calm. It's a calm. Like a man who had already seen the worst the universe could offer. Like a man who had nothing left to fear. She pushed the thought away and closed her eyes. She would not waste her time thinking about a human. He was nothing. 3 months passed on. Valora Kongdoyan lived like a ghost in the palace. He had a small wing of rooms far from the royal chambers. No servants attended him except one old Valoran who brought his meals. No nobles visited him. No guards protected him. He was married to a princess. But he was treated like a forgotten prisoner. Every morning, he woke early and exercised in his room. Push-ups, stretches, movements that kept his body sharp. Then he would walk to the palace archives and spend hours reading. The archives were enormous. Thousands of years of Valoran history filled the shelves. Military campaigns, political records, scientific discoveries. Doyen read everything he could find. He learned about Valoran tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses. The librarians ignored him at first. But after a few weeks, they began to notice something strange. The human was not just reading. He was studying. He asked intelligent questions. He remembered everything. One old librarian, a scholar named Holan, finally spoke to him. "You read more than most Valoran students," Holan said. Duhaon looked up from his book. "Knowledge is free. I would be foolish not to take it. But why military history? Why battles and wars?" Doyon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I want to understand how your people think, how they fight, how they win." Alon studied the human with new eyes, and how they lose. Everything that wins can also lose. The question is how. The old librarian said nothing more. But he began to leave extra books on Dojan's table. Books that were not meant for outsiders. Books about Valoran defeats. Meanwhile, Princess Yura continued her life as if Doyan did not exist. She attended court functions alone. She led diplomatic meetings. She trained with the royal guard. Not once did she visit her husband. Not once did she speak his name. The court noticed. They whispered about the princess and her human pet. Some nobles laughed. Others felt sorry for her, but everyone agreed on one thing. The marriage was a joke. General Tarek was the loudest voice against the union. He appeared at every public event, mocking humans and their weakness. He gave speeches about Valoran's superiority. He called Doyan names that had no translation in human language. One evening, at a grand feast, Tarek finally made his move. The feast hall was filled with nobles. Princess Yura sat at the high table with her family. Doyan sat alone in a corner, eating quietly. Nobody looked at him. Tarek stood and raised his glass. The room fell silent. "My friends," he said loudly, "we gather tonight to celebrate our empire, our strength, our glory." He paused and looked at Doyan with disgust. "But I must ask a question. How can we claim to be strong when we allow insects to marry our royalty?" The crowd murmured. Some nodded in agreement. "I propose a solution," Tarek continued. "Let the human prove his worth. Let him face me in a ceremonial duel. If he wins, I will never speak against him again. But if he loses, the marriage is annulled, and the princess is freed from her shame." The crowd cheered. They loved the idea of watching Tarek destroy the human. Princess Yura's face turned pale. She knew what this meant. Valoran's ceremonial duels were fought to the death. Tarek would kill Doyan in front of everyone. She looked at her husband in the corner. He was still eating as if nothing had happened. Then slowly, Doyan stood up. The room fell silent. He walked through the crowd. Nobles stepped aside, staring at him. He stopped in front of Tarek and looked up at the general, who was 3 feet taller than him. "I accept," Doyan said quietly. The crowd gasped. Tarek's eyes widened in surprise. Then he laughed. "The insect has courage. Foolish courage, but courage." He grabbed Doyan's shoulder hard. "Tomorrow at noon, the grand arena. I will make your death quick, human. Consider it mercy." Doyan did not react to the pain. He simply nodded and walked away. That night, Nari came to Doyan's chambers. She looked worried. "Should not have accepted," she said. Doyan was sitting by the window, looking at the stars. "Why not?" "Because Tarek will kill you. Valoran's ceremonial duels are to the death. He has killed dozens of warriors. You are just a human, I know." Nari stepped closer. "Then why? Why throw your life away?" Doyan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because if I refuse, they will never stop. They will mock me until the day I die. They will use me to humiliate the princess forever. At least this way, I choose my own fate." Nari stared at him. "You are either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both." She left without another word. An hour later, another visitor came. This time, the door opened to reveal Princess Yura. Doyan stood and bowed his head slightly. It was the first time they had been alone since their wedding night. Yura looked at him with cold eyes. "Withdraw from the duel." "No, this is not a request. I am ordering you. You are my wife, not my commander." Her eyes flashed with anger. "If you die tomorrow, it will cause problems for me. Political problems. Withdraw."
Ow.
Doyan studied her face. Then he asked a simple question. "Would my death free you from this marriage?" Yura hesitated. She had not expected that question. "Answer me," Doyan said. "If I die, you will no longer be married to a human. Your shame will end. Is that not what you want?" She could not speak, because the answer was yes. Part of her wanted exactly that. Duhian saw it in her eyes. He nodded slowly. "Then I have my answer." He turned back to the window. "Good night, princess." Yura stood frozen. Something about his calmness disturbed her. This was not how a man facing death should act. She turned to leave. But as she walked past his desk, she noticed something. A small object hidden under a book. Without thinking, she picked it up. It was a medal. Old and worn, but she recognized the symbol. A black sun with red flames. Her blood went cold. She knew this medal. Every Valoran knew it. It was the symbol of the human siege breakers. The most terrifying human military unit in history. They had fought against impossible odds and won. They had held entire planets against Valoran armies. The galaxy believed they were all dead. Wiped out at the Battle of Epsilon Ceti, where 50,000 Valoran soldiers had finally destroyed them. But here was the medal. In her husband's room, she looked at Doyen. He was still facing the window. "Where did you get this?" She whispered. He did not turn around. "It was given to me." "By who?" "Silence. Who are you?" Yura demanded. Doyen finally turned. His eyes were calm and empty, like a frozen lake. "I am your husband," he said. Nothing more. She dropped the medal and left the room quickly. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. Who had she married? What had she married? Tomorrow, she would find out. The Grand Arena of Valora was built 10,000 years ago. It could hold 100,000 spectators. Today every seat was filled. They came to watch a human die. The sun was high and hot. Purple banners flew in the wind. The crowd roared with excitement. Vendors sold food and drinks. Nobles sat in private boxes above the common seats. The emperor himself watched from the royal platform, his face showing no emotion. Princess Yura sat beside her father. She had not slept all night. The medal haunted her thoughts. The black sun. The siege breakers. Questions without answers? General Tarek entered the arena first. He wore full ceremonial armor, gold and silver, shining in the sunlight. In his hand he carried a plasma blade that hummed with deadly energy. The crowd cheered his name. Tarek raised his arms and soaked in the glory. He was a hero to these people, a killer of humans, a symbol of Valoran power. Then the opposite gate opened. Doyen walked out alone. He wore simple gray clothes. No armor, no helmet. His hands were empty. He carried no weapon at all. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then they burst into laughter. He has no weapon. Someone shouted, "The human is mad. This will be over in seconds." Doyen walked to the center of the arena and stopped. He looked small compared to Tarek, small and weak and helpless. But his eyes were different today. They were not empty anymore. They were focused, sharp, like a predator waking from sleep. Tarek approached him with a wide smile. "No weapon, human? Have you come to surrender? No, then you have come to die like a fool." Tarek raised his plasma blade. "Any last words?" Doyen tilted his head slightly. "You talk too much." Tarek's smile vanished. He attacked. The plasma blade cut through the air with deadly speed. A strike that could cut through steel. A strike that had killed dozens of warriors. But it hit nothing. Doyen moved. Not backward. Not sideways. He flowed around the blade like water around a stone. The movement was so smooth, so natural, that it looked like magic. Tarek swung again. And again. Each strike faster. Each strike more powerful. None of them touched Doyen. The crowd went quiet. This was not what they expected. The human was not fighting. He was not even defending. He was simply not there when the blade arrived. "Stand still," Tarek roared. He charged forward with all his strength. A massive overhead strike that would split a man in half. Doyen stepped inside the attack. Before Tarek could react, the human's hand shot out and struck 3 precise points on the general's arm. The plasma blade fell from numb fingers. Then Doyen moved again. One strike to the knee, one to the elbow, one to the throat. Tarek collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. His arm was bent at a wrong angle. His leg would not move. He tried to stand, but his body would not obey. The entire sequence took less than 4 seconds. The arena was completely silent. 100,000 Valorans stared in shock. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Doyan picked up the fallen plasma blade. He looked at it for a moment, then pressed it against Tarek's throat. The general's eyes were wide with fear. "Yield," Doyan said calmly. Never, Tarek spat. "Kill me. Prove that humans are savages." Doyon was quiet. Then he did something unexpected. He turned off the blade and threw it aside. "I did not come here to kill you," he said. "I came here to teach you." He looked up at the crowd. His voice carried across the arena, clear and cold. "You believe humans are weak because we are small? You believe we are nothing because we die young. You have called us insects, animals, pets. But you forget something important." He reached down and grabbed Tarek's collar, pulling the broken general up to face him. "Humans learned to survive not because we were the strongest. We survived because we adapted. We learned. We improved. Every enemy we faced made us better. Every war taught us new ways to fight." He dropped Tarek to the ground. "I was taught that a warrior's worth is not measured by how loudly he roars. It is measured by how quietly he ends the battle." He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, Tarek lay defeated. The crowd remained frozen in shock. Then, slowly, the Emperor stood. The entire arena turned to look at him. The Emperor raised his hand, and the crowd fell even more silent. "Human," the Emperor called out. Doyan stopped but did not turn around. "What is your name?" "Kong Doyan. And what were you before you came here?" Doyan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "A soldier." "Just a soldier?" "Just a soldier who lost everything," continued walking and disappeared through the gate. That night, the Emperor summoned his intelligence officers. He demanded answers. Who was Kong Doyan? What was his history? Why were his records sealed? It took 3 hours to break through the human government's security. What they found changed everything. Doyan. Born on Earth Colony 7, joined the military at 18, showed exceptional talent in combat, was recruited into a special unit at 22. The Siegebreakers. The intelligence officer's voice shook as he read the report. The Battle of Epsilon Ceti. Our forces attacked a human colony with 50,000 soldiers. The colony was defended by only 200 Siegebreakers. The battle lasted 18 days. The Emperor leaned forward. What happened? We won, eventually. But we lost 43,000 soldiers. The humans fought until the last man. They used tactics we had never seen before. Traps, ambushes, psychological warfare. They turned every building into a death trap. They never surrendered. They never retreated. And Doyon, the officer, swallowed hard. He was the last one alive. When our soldiers finally reached him, he had killed over 300 of our warriors alone. He was barely conscious, covered in wounds, but he was still fighting. The room was silent. We captured him. We interrogated him. We tried to break him. The officer paused. We failed. After 6 months, the war ended. The peace treaty was signed. Someone decided to use him for the marriage alliance instead of executing him. The Emperor sat back in his throne. His face was unreadable. They sent us a living weapon, he said quietly, and we treated him like trash. In her chambers, Princess Yura received the same report. She read it 3 times. Her hands trembled. 200 humans against 50,000 Valorans. 18 days of hell. One survivor, her husband. She looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere in this palace, the man called the Reaper was sleeping quietly in his small room, alone, forgotten, treated like nothing. But he was not nothing. He was a god of war wearing the mask of a ghost, and she had married him. 1 month after the duel, the galaxy was talking about only one thing. The human Reaper stories spread from planet to planet. A human had defeated a Valoran general with his bare hands. A human had walked into an arena with no weapon and walked out victorious. A human had made the mighty Valoran Empire look weak. Some stories were true. Others grew wilder with each telling. They said the Reaper could kill with a single touch, They said he could see the future. They said he was not human at all, but something darker. On Valora. Life changed for Kang Do-yeon. Nobles no longer laughed at him. They stepped aside when he walked through the halls. Guards bowed their heads. Servants whispered prayers of protection when they passed his door. Fear had replaced contempt. But Do-yeon lived exactly as before. He woke early. He exercised. He read in the archives. He ate alone. He spoke to almost no one. The only difference was that Princess Yura now visited him. She came to his chambers. 3 days after the duel, she did not apologize for how she had treated him. She simply sat down and asked questions. Why did you not tell me who you were? Do-yeon looked up from his book. Would it have changed anything? I would have known. Known what? That your husband was a killer? That he had blood on his hands? He shook his head. You already hated me. Knowing the truth would only give you more reasons. Ura was quiet. Then she asked, Do you hate me? No, why not? I ignored you. I wished for your death. Do-yeon closed his book and looked at her directly. Because I understand. You did not choose this marriage. You were punished, just like me. We are both prisoners here. Something in his words touched her. She had never thought of him as a fellow prisoner. She had only seen him as a symbol of her shame. Tell me about Epsilon Ceti, she said softly. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant. Oh, there were 200 of us. We knew we could not win. 50,000 Valoran soldiers. Warships in orbit. Heavy weapons. We had nothing but our training and our will. We decided to make them pay for every inch of ground. Every building became a fortress. Every street became a trap. We fought for 18 days, and you survived. I did not try to survive. I was ready to die with the others. But when the end came, I was the last one standing. Your soldiers captured me instead of killing me. His eyes grew darker. Sometimes I wish they had just ended it. Yura did not know what to say. She had won that battle. Her people had celebrated the destruction of the siegebreakers. But sitting here looking at the last survivor, victory felt hollow. She visited him again the next day. And the day after that, they talked about small things at first. Books, food, the differences between human and Valoran culture. Slowly, they began to understand each other, but not everyone was happy about this change. Prince Kale, Yura's older brother, watched the situation with growing anger. Kale was ambitious. He wanted the throne, and he saw Do-yeon as a threat. The human is gaining influence, Kale told his advisors in secret meetings. My sister spends more time with him than with her own family. The emperor watches him with interest. This cannot continue. His advisor nodded. What do you suggest, Your Highness? Remove him, quietly. Make it look like an accident. Kale contacted the Shadow Guild, the most dangerous assassins in the galaxy. He paid them a fortune. 12 elite killers were sent to the palace. They attacked on a moonless night. Do-yeon was reading when he heard the first sound. A soft footstep in the hallway, then another. Then silence. He closed his book and stood. The door exploded inward. Dark figures rushed into the room. They moved with perfect coordination, weapons ready. Targeting every angle, Do-yeon moved faster. The first assassin died before he could raise his blade. Do-yeon grabbed his arm, twisted, and used his own weapon to cut his throat. The second and third came together from both sides. Do-yeon dropped low, swept their legs, and killed them both with precise strikes to the neck. 4, 5, 6. They fell like leaves. The assassins were the best in the galaxy. They had killed kings and generals. But they had never faced anything like this. Do-yeon did not fight like a soldier. He did not fight like a warrior. He fought like a force of nature. Every movement flowed into the next. Every strike was perfect. There was no wasted energy, no hesitation, no mercy. In under 4 minutes, 11 assassins lay dead on his floor. He grabbed the last one by the throat and pinned him to the wall. Who sent you? The assassin gasped. I cannot say. Doyan squeezed harder. Who sent you? The prince. Prince Kale. Please, I am just following orders. Doyon released him. The assassin fell to the ground, coughing. Go back to your master, Doyan said coldly. Tell him this. Next time, come yourself. The assassin ran. News of the attack spread quickly. The emperor summoned Dojan to the throne room. Guards lined the walls. Nobles watched with nervous eyes. Emperor Vorath looked old and tired. The war with the Keth Dominion was approaching, and his empire was cracking from within. Kung Doyon, the emperor said, you killed 12 Shadow Guild assassins in your bedchamber. 11. I let one live to deliver a message. To my son. Yes. The room fell silent. Accusing a prince of assassination was dangerous, but the emperor only nodded. I am aware of Kale's actions. He has been dealt with. He leaned forward. I have a proposal for you. I want you to command a Valoran fleet. Your tactical mind could be useful in the coming war. Doyan shook his head. No. The emperor raised an eyebrow. You refuse? I am not a weapon to be wielded. I am just a man who made a promise. What promise? Doyan looked directly at the emperor. To protect whoever stands beside me, even if they never asked for it. He bowed and left the throne room. Yura was waiting in the hallway. She had heard everything. What promise? She asked softly. He stopped and looked at her. When the siege breakers were formed, we made an oath. We promised to protect those who could not protect themselves. We promised to stand between the innocent and the darkness. He paused. I am the last one. The promise falls to me alone, and you would protect me, even after everything. You are my wife. For better or worse, that means something to me. But she stepped closer. Her hand touched his arm. It was the first time she had ever touched him willingly. Thank you, she whispered. Before he could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the palace. Red lights flashed. Soldiers ran through the halls. An officer rushed toward them, his face pale with fear. Your Highness. The Keth Dominion. They have emerged from dark space. Yura's blood went cold. How many ships? Over 10,000? They outnumber us 10-1. They are heading directly for Valora Prime. Doyon looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, an army of death was coming. The war had begun. The sky above. Valora burned red. 10,000 Keth warships filled the darkness. They had come from the edge of known space, where no light reached and no life survived. The Keth Dominion had been quiet for centuries. Now they wanted blood. The first wave destroyed half the Valoran. Fleet in minutes. Emperor Vorif's flagship was torn apart by enemy fire. The Emperor died with his ship, his last words lost in static. Prince Kale fled in an escape pod before the battle even began. He ran into the darkness and was never seen again. Princess Yura stood on the bridge of the last Valoran dreadnought. Around her officers shouted reports. Screens showed death and destruction. The Empire was falling, but she did not run. All remaining ships formed defensive line around Valora Prime, she commanded. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were hard. We protect our home. Your Highness, an officer said desperately, we have only 47 ships left. The enemy has thousands. We cannot win. Then we will lose with honor. The bridge fell silent. Yura looked at the burning sky and prepared to die. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Doyan walked onto the bridge. He was wearing a simple pilot suit, nothing more. His face was calm, his eyes sharp. You stayed, he said. This is my home. He nodded slowly. Then let me protect it. How? We are outnumbered, outgunned. The Emperor is dead. The fleet is gone. Doyan stepped forward and looked at the battle map. His mind was already calculating distances, speeds, weaknesses. He saw patterns that others missed. He saw a chance. When I was captured after Epsilon Ceti, he said, I spent 6 months studying the galaxy's military forces. The Keth fight with overwhelming numbers. They crush enemies with sheer power. But they have one weakness. What weakness? Their command structure? Everything flows from the flagship. Kill their leader, and their coordination collapses. They become a swarm without direction. An officer shook his head. The flagship is in the center of their fleet. 10,000 ships protect it. No attack could reach it. Doyan turned to Yura. I need a fighter. One fast ship, and volunteers who are not afraid to die? Yura stared at him. You want to attack 10,000 ships with a single fighter? I want to cut off the head of the snake. The body will die on its own. That is suicide. Maybe. He stepped closer to her. But I have been living on borrowed time since Epsilon Ceti. Every day since then has been a gift. I would rather spend that gift protecting something I care about than hiding in safety. Yura felt tears in her eyes. She had ignored this man for months. She had wished for his death. And now he was willing to die for her world. You are a fool, she whispered. Probably. She grabbed his hand and squeezed it tight. Come back alive? That was always the plan.
Ow.
He turned and walked off the bridge. Within minutes, he was in the hangar bay. And he was not alone. 30 pilots waited for him. They were human. All of them. Volunteers who had traveled across the galaxy when they heard the Reaper had returned. Sir, the lead pilot said with a salute. Humanity remembers Epsilon Ceti. We will not let the last siegebreaker fight alone. Doyan looked at their faces. Young and old. Men and women. All of them ready to die. This is a one-way mission, he said. We know. Most of us will not survive. Oh, we know. Doyan nodded slowly. Pride filled his chest. This was what humanity was. This was why they survived. Then let us show the galaxy what humans can do. They launched into the burning sky. 30 human fighters against 10,000 enemy warships. It should have been impossible. It should have been over in seconds. But humans did not fight like other species. Doyan led his squadron through gaps in the enemy formation. He used asteroids as cover. He flew so close to Keth's ships that their weapons could not target him. He did things that no sane pilot would attempt. The Keth tried to stop them. Hundreds of ships converged on the human fighters. But humans were unpredictable. They changed direction without warning. They used tactics that made no sense until they worked. One by one, the human fighters fell. But they kept going. Each pilot took as many enemies with them as they could. Doyan watched his comrades die. He remembered Epsilon Ceti. He remembered every friend he had lost. The anger burned inside him, cold and sharp. Finally, only his fighter remained. The enemy flagship was ahead, surrounded by a wall of defenders. He pushed his engines to maximum. Alarms screamed. His ship began to shake apart. Sir, his computer warned. Structural damage, critical. Impact imminent. I know. He aimed for the command bridge of the enemy flagship. At the last moment, he ejected from his fighter. His body flew through space as his ship crashed into the bridge in a ball of fire. The explosion ripped through the flagship. Shields failed. Armor melted. The command center was destroyed. But Doyan was not finished. He grabbed the edge of the broken hull and pulled himself inside. Around him, Keth warriors screamed in confusion. Fire and smoke filled the corridors. He moved through the wreckage like a ghost. Keth's soldiers tried to stop him. They died. He took their weapons and kept moving. At the center of the ship, he found the Admiral. A massive creature, twice his size, with armor like a tank. Man, the Admiral growled. You destroyed my bridge. You killed my officers. But you cannot kill me. Doyan raised his stolen blade. Let us find out. The fight lasted 3 minutes. The Admiral was strong. The Admiral was fast. But Doyan was something else entirely. When it was over, the Admiral lay dead at his feet. Doyan activated the ship's communication system. His voice broadcast to every Keth vessel in the fleet. Your leader is dead. Your flagship is destroyed. You have 2 choices. Leave now or die here. The Keth hesitated. Without their admiral, they had no direction, no coordination. Panic spread through their ranks. Some ships fled. Others attacked each other in confusion. The Valoran survivors saw their chance and attacked. Within hours, the enemy fleet was broken. Valora Prime was saved. 3 days later, rescue teams found Doyen floating in the debris field. He was barely alive. His body was broken. Burns covered his skin. He should have been dead, but he was breathing. Yura personally flew the rescue ship that brought him home. 2 weeks passed. Doyon lay in the palace medical wing, floating between life and death. The best doctors in the Empire worked to save him. Yura never left his side. She read to him. She talked to him. She told him about the Empire's recovery. She told him about the people celebrating in the streets. She told him that he was a hero. On the 15th day, his eyes finally opened. He saw Yura sitting beside him, her hand holding his. She looked tired. She looked beautiful. "The galaxy is calling you a god," she said softly. He tried to speak. His throat was dry and rough. "I am not a god. I am just a man who was tired of losing people." Tears fell down her face. "I am sorry. For everything. For how I treated you. For wishing you would die. For not seeing who you really were. It does not matter. It matters to me." She squeezed his hand tighter. "Stay with me. Stop being a ghost. Stop trying to die." Her voice broke. "I do not want to lose you now that I finally found you." Doyon was quiet for a long moment. His eyes studied her face. "That was always the plan," he whispered. She leaned down and kissed him gently. It was their first kiss, soft and careful, like a promise. 1 year later, Empress Yura stood before her people. The Empire had been reborn from the ashes. New alliances had been formed. Peace had returned to the galaxy. At her side stood her husband, Kang Do-yoon. The human reaper, the god of war, he still wore simple clothes. He still spoke few words. He still preferred books to crowds. But when foreign dignitaries visited, they always asked about the human beside the throne. They had heard the stories. They wanted to know if they were true, and Yura always smiled and said the same thing. "My husband is a quiet man. He does not like attention, but he is the reason we are all still alive. The reason this empire still stands. The reason I stand before you today." She would look at Doan, and he would look back at her with those calm, steady eyes. He came to us as nothing, a treaty bride, a political tool. Everyone underestimated him. She took his hand and held it tight. They will never make that mistake again. And across the galaxy, whenever someone spoke of humanity, they no longer laughed. They no longer called them insects or pets or weak. They remembered the man who walked into an arena with no weapon and won. They remembered the pilot who flew against 10,000 ships. Alone they remembered the Reaper, and they remembered to be afraid.